This question is from the YouTube viewer winning, I think, the username of the week this week, the energetic panda. Pandas aren't really generally energetic, so I think that's how they're distinguishing themselves. They ask, as Will Lloyd's genuinely amazing long-form article on Kemi Badenoch, is this Will Lloyd's account? Highlighted. The Conservatives are facing problems on all sides, but it seems the bigger issue, as Will briefly mentions in his piece, is how the entire Conservative Party seems to have understood Game of Thrones to be an instruction manual. Such is the level of backstabbing. Why is backstabbing so prevalent in the Tories and less so in Labour? From the outside, the Tories seem to be addicted to regicide. And if you haven't read Will's piece on Kemi Badenoch yet, do seek it out because it is brilliant. And the link to it is in our show notes. I thought this was an interesting question. I wonder if it's just a result of having had so many successive Conservative governments in recent memory, prime ministers changing, quite frequently. The idea that the Tories are this party of regicide has taken hold. Whereas I think if we were still under... if Labour was still under Corbyn in opposition, you would have thought they were more of the backstabbing party.
Well, the Tories until recently were the most successful party in the sort of Western democratic history.
Yeah.
And you don't get that position by accident. So they have been ruthless when it's needed. So, replacing Margaret Thatcher, probably the best example in recent history, putting John Major in, who won, it's an amazing record that he won more votes than any prime minister has before or since.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And replacing Theresa May with Boris Johnson would be another good example. Whereas people look at Labour history and they say they should have got rid of Gordon Brown, they say they should have got rid of Ed Miliband. Now, we can argue about whether a change of leader would have helped, but Labour tends to be much more sentimental about its leaders. And I think that's because it is, broadly speaking, a more ideological party than the Conservatives. It's loyal to its leaders because it sees them as good men, and they all have been men, motivated by a deep-rooted commitment to social justice. Whereas the Conservatives, the principal question is, can you win or lose? And if you look like a loser, you get chucked.
Right.
I think the mechanics are also really interesting because there was a leadership challenge against Jeremy Corbyn in 2016 after the EU referendum. And I went back and I refamiliarised myself with the details of that. And most Labour MPs, like a high number of Labour MPs, I think it was something like 120 to 40 voted to get rid of Corbyn, or at least voted that there should be a leadership challenge. Then he had the opportunity to resign, and perhaps had he been a Conservative, the men in grey suits would have come and said, no, you really have to resign, Mr. Corbyn. He didn't, and because of the rules of how that contest worked, he automatically got put forward as a candidate in the subsequent leadership election, which he probably wouldn't have done if he needed MP nominations for that, given that most of the MPs had just voted that he should go. And that meant that he got to go directly to the membership, and the membership overwhelmingly backed him over this guy, Owen Smith, that we don't really talk all that much about. And if you compare that to Conservative leadership contest, most of the time it's not the contest itself that does it for the leader. They tend to win the contest, but then they realise
they've lost the confidence.
But then
of the
they're
party
so damaged, exactly. Yeah. And you could say that that's sort of what Boris Johnson was trying to do in 2022. He was trying to cling on and say, I'm not going to resign, and force it to go to the members where he would have won. But the Conservative Party is much more strict about when and how and between who the members get to decide, whereas Labour involves their membership more, and that leads to a different dynamic.
Yes, and there is a difference, isn't there, between regicide, as you've both highlighted, is more of a skill on the Conservative side of things, and just general backstabbing. Because, we had years with Labour under Corbyn where, people would, MPs, very senior MPs would publicly, not even privately, brief, very poisonous things about their leader, and the factional infighting was all over the news.
Yeah, they're not nicer.
Yeah, and now you're seeing something similar today. If you if Will's piece is anything to go by, there's some really nasty stuff being said against Kemi Badenoch and the leadership, and divided parties, obviously, famously don't win elections, but obviously, lose the confidence of the public ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, but it has become a conservative tradition, and I think it's one that will, as Will concluded in his piece, be upheld in the case of Kemi Badenoch. William Hague has this great line, which is that the Conservative Party is an absolute monarchy moderated by regicide.
Well, the other thing about the Conservative one is that they changed the rules because they have so few MPs. They massively increased the threshold of Tory MPs who would need to write letters to the chair of the 1922 committee to trigger a leadership contest. It was 15%. Now it's a third. And that means that 40 of them would have to write letters saying, we don't believe that Kemi Badenoch is the right leader, which you may well see after November because she gets like a year's grace period. So watch out for that. On the Labour side, correct me if I'm wrong, George, I think the threshold is 20% of
That's right.
Labour MPs. Yeah. They've got over 400 MPs, so that's 80. So you need 80 Labour MPs to come out and say, we're not happy with Keir Starmer. Now, obviously 20% is a lower proportion than a third, but that's a much higher threshold in numbers terms. And that needs to be factored in if we're thinking about the future of the Labour leadership at the moment.